Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. Josie sat alone in the dimly lit motel room, a suffocating stillness filling the air. Her eyes darted to the clock on the nightstand, anxiety tightening her chest. Arthur was late. Beside her, the phone lay silent on the rumpled bedspread, its dark screen mocking her growing unease. She fixated on it, as if sheer willpower could make it ring. The hum of the air conditioner droned on, failing to calm her racing thoughts. Time was slipping through her fingers, and the weight of her next move pressed heavily on her. Hank would expect her soon. His patience was not something she could test. The phone suddenly vibrated, breaking the oppressive silence. Her heart jumped as she grabbed it, but her anticipation turned to dread when she saw Hank's name glowing on the screen. Her stomach tightened, and her finger hovered over the decline button. Avoiding him wasn't an option. Drawing a deep breath, she answered, forcing her voice into a casual rhythm. "Hi, honey. Everything okay?" "Just wanted to check in," Hank replied, his tone calm but probing. "Where are you?" She let out a laugh, aiming for nonchalance. "At the theater, remember? I told you I was going with coworkers to see a play." "Why?" A brief pause followed. When Hank spoke again, his voice carried an unsettling sharpness. "Do they do plays in motels now?" Josie's blood ran cold. Her pulse quickened, but she kept her voice steady. "Hank, what kind of question is that?" she said, adding a forced chuckle. "You're being ridiculous." He gave a low laugh, though it felt more calculated than amused. "Just joking. It's awfully quiet for a theater." She swallowed hard, her mind scrambling for an excuse. "I'm in the restroom," she lied smoothly. "You're interrupting my evening, you know. Can we talk later?" "Sure," Hank said, his tone lightening. "Enjoy the play. I'll see you when you get back." The line went dead, and Josie's trembling hands placed the phone back on the bed. Her thoughts whirled as she fought to suppress the rising panic. He couldn't possibly know, she reassured herself. It had to be a coincidence. Yet the knot of unease refused to loosen. A soft knock on the door startled her. She hurried to answer, relief washing over her when she saw Arthur stepping in. He cast a quick glance down the hallway before closing the door behind him. Despite his faint smile, his eyes betrayed the tension in his shoulders. "You're late," she whispered, her relief laced with irritation. Arthur sighed, his voice steady but apologetic. "Sorry. Got held up. Nothing serious." He offered no details, but the warmth in his gaze softened her frustration. Taking her hands, he drew her close, and the tension between them dissolved in the quiet intimacy of the moment. She studied his face, the familiar kindness in his eyes, and the rough line of stubble along his jaw, easing her nerves. His smile felt like home, and soon their conversation turned light, soft laughter and quiet jokes filling the room. When his hand brushed against her cheek, she leaned into the touch, letting the world beyond their door fade away. Their lips met in a kiss that began tenderly but quickly deepened. They moved together toward the bed, shedding the weight of their separate lives in each other's embrace. For a few stolen hours, time ceased to matter. Whispered words and gentle touches created a fragile haven, untouched by reality. Eventually, Josie glanced at the clock and sighed. "I need to leave soon," she murmured, her voice tinged with regret. "Hank will start to wonder." Arthur leaned back, a mischievous grin playing on his lips. "We could just vanish," he teased. "Pack up and head somewhere sunny. Just you and me." Her face lit up at the idea. "A quiet beach far from everything," she mused, her voice wistful. "It sounds perfect." Their laughter mingled with their dreams of escape until a sudden, sharp knock at the door shattered their reverie. Josie froze, her body going rigid. "Who could that be?" she whispered, panic creeping into her voice. She scrambled to gather her clothes, clutching the bedsheet tightly around her. Arthur remained calm, flashing her a reassuring smile. "Relax," he said softly. "No one knows we're here. I'll handle it." He slipped on his boxers and approached the door as the knocking grew louder. "All right, hold on," he called, his tone light but firm. Josie watched, her heart hammering in her chest. As Arthur reached for the handle, a terrible thought gripped her. What if it's Hank? Her breath hitched as she fumbled to dress, dread clawing at her as the door creaked open. As the tension in the air dissipated briefly, relief washed over her. It wasn't Hank at the door. That relief was fleeting, though, quickly replaced by confusion as she recognized the woman standing there. Arthur, halfway across the room, froze in his tracks. His face turned ashen, drained of all color. The woman's expression was a storm of fury, every line of her face etched with rage. It was Emily. For a moment, the room held its breath. Emily stood in icy silence, her piercing glare fixed on Arthur. Without warning, she swung her purse with such force that it cracked against his face. Arthur stumbled back, raising his hands in a futile attempt to shield himself. "Emily, please, calm down! Let me explain!" Arthur's voice wavered, desperation bleeding through every word. Emily's words cut through the air, sharp and venomous. "You lying, cheating coward! I knew you were up to something, but this is a whole new low." Josie, frozen in shock at first, finally found her voice. "What is going on here? If you don't leave, I'm calling the cops." Emily's fiery glare shifted to Josie. "Shut your mouth, you filthy little tramp!" she spat, her words slicing like ice. Josie, her face a mixture of shock and defiance, scrambled to grab her bra and hastily pull it on. "And who the hell do you think you are, barging in here like a maniac?" Josie shot back, her voice rising. Arthur, caught in the escalating chaos, raised his hands as though to physically hold back the storm. "Everyone just stop! Let's talk about this calmly." Emily's sharp laugh cut him off. "Oh, I'll do the talking," she snarled. "I'm his wife. The man you've been screwing, he told me he was working a night shift." Josie's jaw dropped in disbelief. "Arthur, you told me you were divorced. Last month, remember?" Arthur, looking like a cornered animal, glanced frantically between the two women. "Josie, I can explain. Emily, let's step outside to talk." He reached out to her, but the moment his hand touched her arm, Emily jerked away with a glare that could pierce steel. "Don't you dare touch me, you lying piece of garbage!" she snapped before delivering a swift knee to his groin. Arthur crumpled, clutching his stomach and groaning in pain. Josie, unable to hold back any longer, shouted, "Are you insane, Emily? You've completely lost it!" Emily's gaze locked onto Josie, her eyes narrowing. "Insane? Sweetheart, this isn't insanity. This is righteous fury." Josie rolled her eyes, slipping on her dress. "I'm out. You two can sort out this circus without me." She headed toward the door, but Emily blocked her path, shoving her back. "And where do you think you're going?" Emily barked, her tone dripping with scorn. "You think you can just walk out of my husband's bed like this is some kind of joke?" Josie squared her shoulders, her voice cold and steady. "Touch me again, and I promise you'll regret it." Emily let out a harsh laugh. "Oh, really? And what exactly are you going to do about it?" Arthur, still doubled over, tried to intervene. "Emily, Josie, please, stop this madness." But Emily silenced him with another swing of her purse, this time hitting his shoulder. "Stop? The only stopping I'll do is in court when I take everything you've got." Arthur winced, rubbing his shoulder. "Emily, please." Josie threw her hands up in exasperation. "You're both out of your minds," she yelled, inching toward the door again. But Emily wasn't done. She lunged forward, grabbing a fistful of Josie's hair. Josie cried out, retaliating by grabbing Emily's hair in return. The two women spun in a chaotic, furious dance, slapping and yanking at each other like wildcats. "You want to play dirty?" Josie hissed, pulling harder. "Fine by me." Arthur, watching the chaos spiral further out of control, stepped between them. "Ladies, enough!" he begged. Bad timing. Josie swung wildly, aiming for Emily, but instead landed a sharp slap on Arthur's jaw. "Oops," she muttered, her tone far from apologetic. Emily seized the opportunity, tugging Josie's hair harder and managing to slap Arthur square on the other cheek in the process. "Can you both stop hitting me for just 1 second?" Arthur groaned, clutching his face. Neither woman heeded his plea, locked as they were in their own battle. Emily managed to slap Josie's arm, smirking triumphantly. "How's that for a goodbye?" Josie retaliated with a slap of her own. "That all you've got? Pathetic." Arthur, thoroughly defeated, threw his hands in the air. "I'm done! Good luck sorting this mess out!" He collapsed onto the bed, groaning, as the two women continued their frenzied fight, oblivious to his surrender. When the dust began to settle, the two women launched themselves at each other with wild, unchecked energy. Their tussle, frantic and clumsy, lasted an eternity in just over a minute. Hair was yanked, and slaps landed with more force than aim, until finally they tore apart, panting and disheveled. They stood across from one another, glaring, their fury matched only by their exhaustion. Around them, the room wore the scars of their fight, a chaotic, upended mess. Arthur leaned heavily against the wall, his expression one of a man battered by a storm not of his own making. Josie smoothed down her rumpled dress, trying to salvage some shred of dignity. "With antics like that, it's no wonder he's always running away from you," she snapped, her words dripping with venom. The two women, standing a few feet apart, were a picture of disarray. Hair tangled, clothes askew, and cheeks flushed with the unmistakable marks of combat, they looked like they'd walked through a tornado. But the battle wasn't over. It had simply shifted to words, sharp and cutting as daggers. Emily scoffed, flicking a stray lock of hair off her shoulder. "And that's your idea of a dress? Darling, even reality TV stars wouldn't stoop that low." Josie's eyes rolled dramatically as she fired back. "At least I'm not strutting around in that leopard print catastrophe. Did a zoo escapee dress you this morning?" Arthur, rubbing his own bruised jaw, raised his hands in a futile attempt to broker peace. "Ladies, can we try being adults for a second?" he pleaded. The response was swift and unanimous. Their combined scorn silenced him, leaving him slumping further into the wall like a man who'd realized he was out of his depth. As the verbal sparring reached its peak, Josie decided it was time to leave. Steeling herself, she prepared to shove past Emily if necessary. But before she could act, Emily rummaged through her bag and retrieved a spray can, brandishing it like a weapon. A sly smirk played on her lips. "Want to take this up a notch? Let's see how you like this." Before Josie could react, Emily unleashed a blast of aerosol. Josie managed to squeeze her eyes shut, but the acrid fumes enveloped her, stinging and choking. Coughing violently, she stumbled backward, waving her hands in a desperate attempt to clear the air. "Is this nail polish remover?" Josie choked out, her voice raw as tears streamed from her burning eyes. The room filled with an industrial stench that clung to her throat like smoke from a chemical fire. Through the haze, she saw Arthur wrestling the spray can from Emily's hands. "Stop biting me, Emily!" he yelped, his voice strained between coughs. Realizing this was her chance, Josie blinked away the sting and bolted for the door, using the wall as a guide. Arthur's protests faded behind her as she stumbled into the hallway, gasping for clean air. The cool night air hit her lungs like salvation. Josie staggered toward her car, her mind racing with disbelief and fury. "Never again," she muttered under her breath. "That's the last time I let anyone talk me into this." Her relief was short-lived. As she approached her car, the sight of bold, black graffiti on the side stopped her cold. The word whore screamed back at her in crude, dripping letters. Her jaw clenched as her fists balled up. "Perfect, just perfect," she growled, yanking the car door open. Sliding into the driver's seat, she caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror and froze. A black streak of paint marred her cheek, a souvenir from Emily's aerosol assault. Grabbing a wet wipe, she tried to scrub it off, only to smear it further. "Great," she muttered darkly. "Now I need paint thinner just to clean my face." Her dress was torn, her cheeks bore slap marks, and her hair was a wreck, but none of it mattered. Anger fueled her now. She jammed the key into the ignition, only to hear the dreaded thump-thump of a flat tire. Climbing out, she discovered a jagged puncture in the rubber, mocking her misery. She spat on the ground in frustration. "Emily, you'll pay for this," she growled. "Round 2 is coming." The drive home, slow and fraught, blurred into a haze of rage. By the time Josie stormed into her house, Her mind was consumed with a single thought: revenge. Thoughts of explanations or excuses didn't even cross her mind. Hank, lounging in the kitchen with a cup of coffee, looked up as she entered. One glance at her smeared face and torn dress, and he burst into laughter. "Well, look at you," he said, his grin wide. "Raccoon or performance art? Can't decide." Josie ignored him, her focus on rummaging through cabinets for something, anything, to clean her face. Her hands fumbled as her mind boiled with fury. Hank leaned casually against the counter, smirking. "Tough night at the theater?" he quipped. "Or is this some avant-garde method acting I'm not in on?" Scrambling for an excuse, Josie stammered, Hooligans. Some homeless guys thought we were part of a show and went nuts with spray paint. Real artsy stuff." Hank's eyebrow arched as he barely contained another laugh. "Well, that's certainly one way to spend an evening." Experimental theater, far from the usual vibe in the downtown arts scene. Bold, immersive, and seemingly without structure. Josie let out a forced laugh, her head low as she rummaged through the cluttered room. Across the space, Hank strolled toward the window, lazily sipping his coffee until something outside snagged his attention. Painted in vivid strokes along the side of Josie's car was a single, glaring word. Hank almost choked on his coffee. "Well, isn't this something?" he said, his voice laced with sly humor. "You've decided to name the car? Kind of brutal, don't you think?" Josie froze mid-motion, her cheeks blazing crimson. Hank turned back toward her, leaning against the wall with an air of exaggerated gravity. "Should I be concerned?" he teased, arching an eyebrow. "You look like you've been through some kind of disaster zone. Want a hand with whatever this is?" That broke her. Josie spun around, her patience fraying. "Hank, I do not have time for your nonsense right now," she snapped, grabbing for a rag, a sponge, anything to erase the chaos. Her muttered curses filled the room as she darted from one corner to the next, a whirlwind of frustration. Hank leaned against the doorway, his grin growing wider with every frantic move she made. He couldn't have orchestrated a better scene if he'd tried. The drama was far richer than he'd anticipated. He observed her attempt to scrub paint off her face with one hand, while simultaneously wriggling into an oversized hoodie and sweatpants. "Tell me honestly," he said, barely stifling a laugh, "did you actually go to the theater? Because, Josie, you look like you squared off with a tornado." She shot him a venomous glare. "Yes, Hank, I was at the theater," she bit out. "What kind of ridiculous question is that?" He tilted his head, pretending to scrutinize her appearance. "You sure? From this angle, it looks like you took on an alien invasion and lost." Her glare sharpened, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "You're hilarious, Hank. Truly. Have you considered a career in comedy?" She yanked the hoodie over her head and started rifling through a nearby cabinet, muttering, "Where's the damn baseball bat?" Hank raised his eyebrows, feigning alarm. "Hold on. What's the plan here? Are we talking musical rumble a la West Side Story? Or full-on vigilante Chuck Norris?" Her glare could have incinerated steel. "Enough with the jokes, Hank. Just hand me your car keys." Recognizing he'd pushed her to the brink, Hank stepped forward, his tone softening. "Josie, slow down for a second. Take a breath. Talk to me." She stopped, but the fire in her eyes didn't dim. "There's no time, Hank. That lying coward needs to face what's coming to him." Hank raised his hands in a calming gesture. "Before you start dishing out street justice, there's something you should know. Arthur, he's juggling 2 girlfriends, and I'm not sure where you fit into his lineup." The room went still as his words sank in. Josie's face shifted, fury giving way to stunned disbelief. "Wait, are you saying he's seeing someone else?" she asked, her voice trembling. "That two-timing bastard!" Hank's steady gaze didn't falter. He let the silence speak for him, watching as comprehension dawned on her face. Her eyes flicked to Hank, panic overtaking anger. "Oh no," she whispered, realization hitting her like a slap. "What did I just say?" Hank let out a humorless chuckle. "Yeah, Josie, I've pieced it all together. Did you really think I wouldn't notice the lies, the sneaking around? Arthur, seriously? The guy's cheating on his wife, you, and someone else. Quite the hat trick." Her defenses crumbled. Tears welled up as she cradled her head in her hands. "I didn't want this, Hank. It was stupid and reckless. I messed up. Hank's voice remained firm. Stupid? Reckless? Sure, but let's not downplay it. You knew exactly what you were doing. Her head snapped up, incredulous. Wait, you've been spying on me? Following me? He crossed his arms, unbothered. Not spying, just enough digging to confirm what I already suspected. Her eyes widened in realization. So, Emily showing up out of nowhere? That was your doing? Hank allowed himself a small grin. Call it coincidence, or maybe just karma finding its way. Funny how things work out. Josie threw her hands up, her voice rising in indignation. You've ruined my life, Hank! All of this chaos! You set it in motion! Hank didn't flinch. Let's get real, Josie. When I called you and you lied about where you were, who was setting who up? You made these choices. She faltered, searching for a way to shift the blame. You've endangered me, Hank. I'm the victim here, dragged into this mess you created. His expression hardened. A victim? Josie, the second you betrayed me, you became the architect of your own chaos. If your life's a mess now, it's only because you built the storm. Hank's eyes hardened, a cold determination settling in his gaze. His voice dropped to a disturbingly even tone. Josie, enough with the theatrics. We're not actors in some tragic play, he said, his words slicing through her defenses. Josie's eyes filled with tears, her composure cracking as a choked sob escaped her. Moments later, she completely broke down, her emotions spilling out uncontrollably. Hank stood motionless, his arms crossed tightly over his chest, exuding an air of impatience that made it clear he had reached his limit. I cared about you, Josie. I believed in you, he said, his voice carrying a faint trace of regret. But you went too far. Don't bother with excuses, I've heard enough. You threw everything away for that sorry excuse of a man, Arthur. Honestly, you should count yourself lucky I didn't handle this differently. Trust me, I had options. Josie's sobs escalated into a desperate scream. How could you, Hank? This is heartless. But Hank didn't flinch. His expression remained resolute as he responded in a measured, unyielding tone. Don't even try to twist this into some narrative about double standards, Josie. It's not going to work. His voice turned final, cutting off any further argument. Tomorrow the lawyer will deliver the divorce papers. If you've got anything left to say, save it for the courtroom. Just remember one thing. This isn't something I orchestrated. You did this to yourself. What followed was nothing short of a spectacle. A courtroom battle that blurred the lines between legal proceedings and personal vendettas. Josie and Emily turned the divorce hearing into a dramatic clash of accusations and rebuttals. Ultimately, the judge sided with Josie, ruling that Emily owed her compensation for the custom paintwork on her car. Arthur, reeling from the chaos he had helped create, found himself shouldering the financial fallout. By the time Emily was finished with him, Arthur was left with an empty bank account, a foreclosed house, and a pile of regrets. Emily made certain Arthur walked away with little more than a parking ticket receipt and a hollow nod from his lawyer. Hank, however, emerged from the ordeal unscathed. His calculated approach had paid off. He had remained calm, avoided the turmoil, and kept his dignity intact. While Josie's betrayal had stung, Hank couldn't deny a quiet sense of triumph at how the situation had unfolded. He had outmaneuvered every other player, safeguarding his finances and sidestepping the chaos entirely. With a clear conscience, stable finances, and a newfound sense of independence, Hank left the wreckage of his marriage behind. The experience had been a painful one, but it came with valuable lessons and an unforgettable story to tell over a drink. And so, Hank's story concluded with a sense of closure and a clean slate. Life, messy as it had been, granted him a surprisingly drama-free ending, something he could raise a glass to with genuine satisfaction. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel.